I'm Haley Stanton, and I've been part of Renew from the very beginning.
I'm Luke Stanton, and exactly the same since the church started.
We got married very young, so I started dating Luke right out of high school, and so we kind of grew up together. So I would say I certainly was a believer before I ever met Luke, but the way that I owned my faith as an adult certainly looked very different than youth group or as a child. And so I almost would just say that I feel like so much of the maturity of my faith came from life together. Marriage certainly tests you and challenges you and gives you opportunities to be refined in different ways, and I would say all of those things are true. But yeah, I mean, we've been really involved together in ministry since the beginning, I mean, always. And we have a lot of stories of things that we've done and a lot of adventures of things that we've done through ministry and through faith opportunities. And yeah, I would say that was just, very rich, very good foundation for us for starting a family and the transition into parenting.
Yeah, I think I share this story, with some where, you think you're probably a pretty good person, or like I'm a good Christian, or whatever that might look like for you, but it's certainly not selfish. And then you get married and you instantly realize how unbelievably selfish you are. And so I think in terms of like the journey to maturity, I was, and Haley has so much grace, but just selfish in so many different ways. And so getting married puts you in a position where that has to be eliminated, right? For you to have a successful marriage, you have to think about somebody else and put that other person first. And that's hard, and you're not successful with it 100% of the time. But like Haley said, I think from the very beginning, even like our debt freedom story and all those things, we were just, I think, in the deep end of the pool of trying to walk out our faith and walk out our faith together. And the good news is when you can step out in that, not really knowing what's going to happen, that the Lord certainly shows up. And so from when I look back, I just feel like the last 15 years are filled with really not necessarily knowing what we were going to do, but trying to trust in the Lord. And consequently, we have these wonderful stories of where God is showing up. God is showing up in our debt story, in ministry, in our friend group, and just some amazing adventures that we've basically had the opportunity to kind of experience together as a result of that. So, yeah.
I don't know, we sort of had a stirring about not feeling like we were very connected and not necessarily doing what we felt like was right for our family, but also struggling to figure out where to go or what to do so that it would be right for our family. And then Wayne called Luke, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, we did have a stirring. So we had spent some time just trying to understand where the Lord was leading us next, and just not having a real clear answer, but definitely felt like the Lord was preparing us for something. And so that journey had kind of already started. And then I did get a phone call from Wayne, but we're close to the Williams, as well as the other families that had been having kind of a similar stirring. And so I got a call from Wayne, and we sat down and as a group really just started asking the Lord what was next. And I think that was really common, is that we just didn't know exactly what that was. And it was interesting just to see how the Lord led us, and that began to change quickly, because we didn't meet for that long before we decided to throw together a service and invite some people, which turned into a very different thing, not something that we expected, but an amazing journey of where the Lord, started with us, and then just a few months later, having 600 people show up for a service. It was wild. I mean, I think that as we started to meet, because Everly was born a couple months, or maybe a month or so before we actually started to get together and meet, I think. I don't remember exactly. But anyways, she was an infant, weeks old. And I think what happened in that is that the way in which Haley and I prayed, and the way we thought about this as a group even, because I think we were the only ones that had not had kids yet, it changed a lot of our perspective on what we were praying for and what we were looking for, and really asking God to help us build a church for Everly, and just giving us some context for what families might be looking for and what's important. And so I think, just having a kid in general is a huge paradigm shift. And so all of that just shaped, just having a kid and introducing that, now you're responsible for this person and making sure that you raise her up in the way in which she should go. And so I think all of that just got bundled into maybe asking different questions and maybe listening a little bit differently. So.
I also think too, just what we were looking for changed. I don't know that we could have identified it the way that we can now look back. Hindsight's always 20/20. But I think that recognizing that starting a family and truly having a village to help raise that child, and who do we want that village to be, and the people that we were locking arms with to try to figure this new thing out were those people. Those were people that we wanted to rally around our family and love on our family, and that were several steps ahead of us that could disciple us and mentor us and help us, with challenges of parenting in general, but also just the shift to become new parents. And so I think that it was really exciting and kind of emotional to think about how we are building a church for our child and what does that look like. But really exciting, but definitely a perspective change nonetheless.
Yeah, and for the first year, and then COVID, and all those, we kind of headed into all those things. But for the first year, Everly was like the only baby. There were a couple other kids that had started to get introduced, and if you go through Renew today, there's just masses of kids running up and down the hallways screaming. It's the most amazing thing. And so you just see this huge influx of young families, and our whole kids wings are full of kids. And I don't know, looking back on that, it's just interesting to see again, like what we thought and prayed for, and then how the Lord kind of multiplies. And that's exactly what we are. All of us, just as believers, are stewards, right? Like, you're stewarding your time, your gifts, your talents, your abilities. And it's all borrowed, right? Because we don't live forever. And so this time on earth is not promised, you're not promised tomorrow, but you've got to live in a way that you're just a steward of what God has given you. And so when you look at that within the context of the church and ministry, there's a responsibility to be faithful with your time, to be faithful with your gifting, to step in and trust in the Lord and say, I have these things, this gifts, this time, whatever it might be, and it's all His anyways. And so I think just stepping into the church too and doing this crazy thing of a church plant, especially in the midst of the pandemic, it's all about trusting the Lord and stewarding what He's already given you. And that's not to say all we have to do, but that's the thing. We just have to do that. We have to be faithful stewards. And the Lord does the rest. The Lord does the math. The Lord, reaches the lost. It's a matter of you being faithful, I think, in that stewardship.
I feel like our debt freedom story really helped us to just be aligned from the beginning. Though we had a lot to learn, I would not say that, I would say we were always on the same page. This is what we were going to pursue, and we were going to pursue it together. And so as part of that, while we were working to be debt-free, it was just a non-negotiable that we were going to give to the church and that we were going to give to ministry, that was just part of what we were going to do. And so I just don't know that it was ever an idea that it wasn't going to happen. It was just what we did. And so that didn't change. That hasn't changed in any of the seasons of our life, because when you already count for that money not to be there, you don't expect it to be there. So it doesn't matter that we had children. It wasn't our money anyway. And so I wouldn't say that that's changed. I would say that what has changed is that we've seen how the Lord has provided for us, and the amazing stories that have come out of that, and the joy that it is to be part of someone else's story of provision or blessing. And I think that has fostered a heart of generosity. And that's something we want for our family. We want our children to know that, and we want our children to be that way. And so we want to model that for them. I think more recently, the idea of stewardship to, kind of like what Luke said, that it's not just about stewarding finances, that it's about stewarding all the resources that the Lord has given you. And so I think that's been bigger conversations that we have had more recently, is that not to say that we've mastered the finances piece, but tithing is relatively easy for us. We just do it and always have. And so it's not something we think about. So what are the other things that God is calling us to be a better steward of? And how are we being faithful in those things? I don't know if I could have answered that question in the beginning. I think that in a lot of ways I was very overwhelmed by being a new mom. Luke may not remember, but she was 6 weeks old when we first met. It was very, very early on in our journey, and a 6-week-old just sleeps and eats and doesn't eat a whole lot. But as they transition, it's not too long before you're like, wow, I've got to figure out how to actually feed them. They need bottles, and now they need real food, and now their sleep schedule changes, and now they nap differently, and all the things. And so I think that it was actually hard for me in a lot of ways to see past that moment that we were in. But what was really exciting was that the people that we were doing this with had a lot of great vision and had a lot of great experience, not only with their children, but in other ministry opportunities that they've been part of, that they have developed and grown children. And we know so many of those families and so many of their kids so well. And what I would say is that my vision for Everly was, wow, if we can do this the same way y'all did it, if our children can know and love the Lord the way your children know and love the Lord, and if we can set up ministry opportunities that impact my child the same way that your child has been impacted, then I trust you. I trust that you're pursuing the right things and developing the right things and have the right vision, because I'm still so new to all of this that I don't know. But what I know is I do want Everly to love the Lord, and I want her to have a place that she wants to be, and a place that she wants to be part of, a place that she can serve, and a place that there is a spot for her. I think that our church has done an amazing job of making sure that kids have a place. So, early on, Mallory, I think she might have only been 11 or 12 when she started serving with, the babies in the nursery, and that's amazing. That's amazing. And she has literally known Everly since day one, since very early on. And so now I guess what I would say my vision for what I hope the church should be for my daughter is exactly what it is. I am really proud of what we're doing and what the team has cultivated here. I think that our church not only has said that they want to put an emphasis on kids, but I think they're doing it. And I'm not sure that I could ask for anything better. I feel so proud of how they're pursuing the Lord and listening to the Lord and hearing from the Lord and then executing on that. I feel like it's amazing, and I'm so glad that my family's part of that.
When we were just meeting early on, so Everly was 6 weeks old, apparently, and allegedly, we were, just these families are kind of together praying through and doing everything from, coming up with what we believed as an organization or as a church, and how we wanted to start to plan around that. So all those things, right? And then in the corner, somebody in that community group is holding Everly and, feeding her a bottle. And so not really knowing what that meant to build a church around our daughter, I think you actually saw a really great snapshot of what that meant, which was, people helping us to share in that burden of raising kids. And I think that's a lot of what this is that collectively we're here to invest in one another, invest in our children, in a wild and crazy world where they're getting all kinds of messaging. And so I think just looking back, it was interesting to see that picture, and everybody kind of played a role in that. And if she's crying and someone else would kind of pick her up and carry along. I remember Mike Stone holding her and it being so sweet, and she fell asleep. And when Mike passed her back to one of us, apparently she had pooped all over him. And so he was wearing a white shirt too. So this very sweet moment turned into this, what I thought was hilarious. I don't know how Mike felt about it, but I don't know, that's commitment. And I think that's really representative of what we have at the church today, so.
Well, I feel like, Everly is 4 now. We have our son, Archer, he's 15 months, so we are not as new to parenting as we were, but certainly the shift in parenting 2 children has been a shift, another transition, and I think it's been a new season of trying to figure out what does it look like to pursue the Lord in this season? Because gone are the days where, you just decide to get up early and have an hour-long quiet time and journaling and prayer time and all this great uninterrupted time, because notoriously somebody didn't sleep all night long, or we were up every 2 hours, or somebody's up at 5 a.m. For good for the day, or whatever your plans were for that happening. They just don't look that way. And so I think that I'm definitely in a season of, what does that look like? The Lord knows. The Lord knows that that's my season, and He gifted me in that way. I mean, children are gifts, and so finding Him, in the small things, looking for ways to rejoice, have prayer time, in different ways than I used to, because that just looks different. So finding that still and quiet time amidst life that is never still or quiet. So I would say that's a big thing. I think that we see the Lord's provision and hand in so many things. I would say recently, we've really been struggling with eczema with our daughter. Just horrible, head to toe, waking up 8 or 9 times a night, just really uncomfortable and really miserable. And we have just really seen a lot of healing take place. And I know that that's God's hand at work. We have certainly been on our knees praying, but we have an amazing group of people around us who have also been prayer warriors for our family, for our daughter. And that's amazing. I mean, that is not a surprise, right? God wants to heal her. God loves her. But just amazing that we have people that will rally around us in that way. And so that's been something really sweet that we have seen in this season. And I don't know maybe we just have a nice little reprieve, but we're rejoicing and thanking the Lord for it, and so thankful for the people in our lives that are so willing to join us in that pursuit, and and even in tangible ways that people love our families so well, through recognizing that Everly has had some struggles, and yeah, I feel like that's just been something really cool that we've seen the Lord do here recently that we're just super thankful for.
Yeah, Everly's very much in that why stage. And so driving along and she's just, asking questions, and then you get in a rhythm of answering it, and then she just hits you with 20 whys, and then finally you're like, I don't know the answer. And something that she does is very matter-of-factly respond, and she's sitting in the back like sucking her thumb, and she'll take it out and she'll go, well, Jesus knows. And you're like, yeah, he probably does. He probably does know. And then, we'll go on to something else. So it's interesting to see, she's 4 now, and the things that she's already processing and even believing about the world around her. And if I look at the last 4 years, she's been part of this whole thing. And Archer more recently, but Everly has been here since the beginning. And I think it's a sweet thing to see some of the fruits of that, because she's around that community and she's around people who are loving her and praying for her. And I think that's the whole point of all this, is that we rally together around one another, and that we don't do this by ourselves, but collectively we raise our kids together and we pray for one another and we're there for one another. And so starting to see that, I think, articulated in some of my daughter's answers, and it's just an amazing thing.